This is the November 2022 CAPS Dbe Nsc, paper 1. Oh, we're looking at question 9. It's given that f of x equals x squared. Okay. It wants the minimum distance between this point and a random point on F. So distance between 2 points. I'm going to start there. Any distance between 2 points, you can use the distance formula. So we want the distance formula is the x's, the distance between the x's, so x1 minus x2, and then the distance between the y's. This is from any point x1, y1, and a point x2, y2. So obviously if you start on x1, you have to start on y1. And if you were to start on x2, you'd have to start on y2. So whichever of these points goes first must go first in the distance formula. Negatives between them and a plus in the middle. Okay. We sub in what we know. Probably easier to start with this point. So our distance square root of the x10 minus x squared. So it's 10 minus x. We started on the 10. Just have to do the other x from the second point. Plus 2 minus y squared. Okay. So whichever one you start on, you have to start on the other one as well. Right. Okay. This is our distance. Now, I know we're working with maximum and minimum, so I don't really want to square root in my answer. So what I do is just square both sides to get rid of that square root. So I ended up with d squared. Then we can times out, the square root cancels out on this side. So we can times this out. It's 10 times 10, 100. There's 2 in the middle. So 2 times and minus x times 10 times 2 is minus 20x. And then it's minus x times minus x is plus x squared. Then we're plussing 2 times 2 is 4. Minus y times 2 is minus 2 times, there's 2 of them, times 2 is going to be minus 4y. Oopsie. 4 minus 4y and y plus y squared. Okay. I think if any like terms, no. Yeah, there aren't any like terms. So that's the formula for the distance squared. So this is just whenever you're working with maximum and minimum of anything, it's calculus work. So you want to find any formula. You just want a formula for what you're trying to find maximum and minimum of. So that's the first step. Okay, I'm looking at this question. There's still too many unknowns. So we were given the information that f of x equals x squared. So that means that our y is going to equal x squared. Y is going to equal x squared. That was given. So determine the minimum distance given that f of x is equal to x squared. So we can sub in x squared for all our y values here. We're just making sure there's only one unknown. Otherwise, you won't be able to really work with the problem. Minus 4x squared. So wherever I see a y, I just put in x squared. If we finish this up, minus 20x plus x squared plus 4 minus 4x squared plus x to the power 2 times 2 is 4, so x to the power of 4. Okay. So from here, we are looking for a minimum value. For any maximum, we want the first derivative equal to 0, and then we find our x's. So, and then after you find your x's, you sub back into the original formula. And in this case, it's the formula for distance that we have, which is this formula that we have. So in order to get your y's. So, okay, we're here. We need to find, oh, what's this? It's left over from another video. Let's quickly clean that up. All right. We need to find d squared. Whoopsie. There we go. D squared over dy dx, or we want d squared y over dx. Oopsie. Okay. And this is just the first derivative. So we want to find this thing. Looking at this, I'm actually going to start with the x4 term over here and work it backwards. So x4 is 4x3. So it's 4 times 1, and then 4 minus 1 is 3. And we do that, the next term, 4x squared is negative 8. 4 times 2, negative 8x. The 4 is a part of a constant term. That would have been 104 here. Okay. Just to note that when we're finishing up later. There was another x squared term here. Hang on a sec. Let's clean this up a little bit first. (104) minus 20x minus 3x squared plus x4. Okay. We dealt with this one already. So minus 3x squared is going to be minus 3 times 2 is 6x, 2 minus 1. And then we have minus 20. And we know that for maximum and minimum, if we want to find the x's at the max and the minimum points on a graph, then if you want to find the x's for these points, then we let this equal to 0. Okay. So 4x3 minus 6x minus 20 equal to 0. This is a cubic graph, so we have to get the first factor using the calculator. Is the method I like to use, is to get I'm just going to grab my calculator. Right, so just a quick, this calculator work. So you press mode on your calculator, and it's either number 3 or number 7, depending on which calculator you're using. And then you choose table as your option. You'll get this f of x equals something, and you add it in. So you write in your equation there. To get the x's, you press alpha, and the red x is above the sort of right bracket. Then it asks you start, and I put -9 and press equals, and then end at 9 equals. And it says steps, and I say 1 step equals. Okay, so that's the calculator work. And you end up with a column of f and f of x with some sort of values here and some sort of values here. So these are your x's and these are your y's. Okay, so we want where y is 0 for it to be a factor. So you scroll down, and I get that there's where x is 2, then there's y is 0. So when x is 2, y equals 0. So f of 2 must be 0. Therefore, x equals 0 exists, and x equals 2, excuse me. X minus 2 equals 0 is therefore our factor. X minus 2 is our first factor. Sometimes you can get more than one factor using the calculator method. Using my method, though, I do it this way. So we have our first factor. And I use algebra to see if there's any other factors besides this one, just to check There's quick methods to do this, but this is a very sure, solid method to make sure that I don't make any mistakes or something like that. Okay, let me grab this. So here's our little, okay. So we're aiming to end on this cubic graph. And we started factorizing. X minus 2 is our first factor. Open up our second brackets. There's going to be some sort of trinomial. So the first term of the trinomial, our answer is going to be the 4x cubed. And we need a times, we say, what do we need to times by x in order to get 4x cubed? Well, we need to times it by 4x squared. 4x squared times x makes 4x cubed. And then the first term is the easy. And then the third term also pretty easy. We have to get the constant term in the cubic graph. And this we use the constant term of our first factor. So we ask ourselves, what times minus 2 makes minus 20? Well, 10 times minus 2, a positive 10 times minus 2 is going to give us minus 20. And finally, we have to do this middle term. Now, this one's a little bit more tricky. There's a few more steps. The middle term, now, be careful of this. We don't use this minus 6x. We use the x squared term. And in this case, actually the x squared term is 0x squared. So I like to just rewrite this for teaching purposes, but you can just know that if there's no x squared term, it's in fact a 0x squared that we're working with. So we're aiming for that 0x squared. That's what we're aiming for. In order to get this, we times these two together. And minus 2 times 4x squared is minus 8x squared. And you need a plus or minus something to equal 0x squared. So you ask yourself, what times minus 8x squared? What plus or minus to minus 8x squared? It will give us 0. And of course, it's just 8x squared. And the way this method is designed is the middle term will be 8x. So it'll drop one of these. It drops the square there. So here we have our fully factorized, well, not quite fully factorized. Oh, that's the useless eraser again. It's coming back to haunt me. Let's do this. Okay. So looking at this, and I mean, we have 4x squared. Oh, this was plus, wait, we had minus 8. Yeah, it was a plus 8 squared. Plus 8x plus 10. We take out 4 as a common factor. We get x plus 2x plus 5. And I'm looking at that already and I'm thinking, 5 and 1 are our factors. How on earth is that ever going to make 2? So let's just check. So minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And when I think it might not work, I do this part under the square root sign first, because if it's negative underneath the square root sign, then this is invalid. It doesn't exist. It's an imaginary number. So we don't want to use imaginary numbers. We want real numbers. So let's take a look. B squared is 2 squared minus 4. 1 is our a value, 1. And c is 5. So if you really look at this, this is going to be 4 minus 20, and that's negative. Okay, so this is invalid. There are no real answers to this. Another way is just fill in all the x's, fill in all these values in your quadratic formula and put it in your calculator, and you'll get an error on the calculator, and that just both your plus and your minus option will give you an error, and that shows that it's an invalid option. So this is all invalid. And this exists, the x minus 2. Okay. So let's take a look. Where were we? Just cleaned that up a little bit. So we finished up x minus 2 is a factor. So that means that it exists, x minus 2 can equal to 0. And therefore, x equal to 2 is going to be a valid option for x to work out our max or our min distance or whatever we're working with. This was the minimum distance. Now, if you had got more than one factor, you would have had to do some sort of test, either the second derivative test or just by inspection to work out if this was the min or max. But because there's only one x, we can assume that this is the only x that we need. So we can assume it's going to be our min distance. Okay. So what do we need to do? We have our x value that will give us our minimum distance. So we need to go back to our distance formula, which was this d squared equation. And remember, it's d squared, we actually just want distance, but let's start with subbing in the x value there. So d squared is equal to 104 minus 20 times 2. We're subbing in x equals 2 minus 3, 2 squared plus 2 to the power of 4. So d squared, add this all up. You can do it yourself or put it in your calculator. For time, I get 68. I get 68 and take the square root of both sides. Now, distance can only, when you do your own square root, it's positive or negative, but distance can only be positive. It's an actual thing. You can only walk a positive, it's a distance. There's no such thing as a negative distance. I mean, you can walk backwards, but it's not the same thing as a negative distance. So the distance is the square root of 68, which simplifies fully to 2 square root 17, or in decimal form, 8.25 units. Right. Let's just go back and check that we answered the question. It is determine the minimum distance. And this is the 8.25 is the minimum distance. That's the end of question 9.